Recently, Dwayne, formerly The Rock, now The Pebble, Johnson, has generated a large amount of speculation after he showed off what appeared to be a dramatically smaller physique. This discussion about his weight loss comes on the heels of the release of his latest film, The Smashing Machine, a biopic about former amateur wrestler and MMA fighter Mark the Smashing Machine Kerr. Because I've talked about Dwayne in the past, and I was looking for something a bit simple before I got into some deeper topics, I thought it would be interesting to talk about this recent controversy, for lack of a better word.
Think about it though, Tone. So weight loss.
The first thing I would say about this situation is that I think in the pursuit of jumping to conclusions, a lot of people are overlooking the relationship this transformation has to the movie The Smashing Machine itself, because there has actually been some confusion. For instance, if you were to look up why Johnson recently lost weight, an answer that comes up occasionally, especially in the AI searches, is that he actually lost 60 pounds to play Mark Kerr. But I think the idea that Dwayne would lose weight for this role would be so plainly absurd that anybody could recognize it as not being true. Another issue is that the director of the movie, Benny Safdie, directly contradicts this idea.
I said, Dwayne, I think you need to get a little, and I was like, how do I say this? Bigger, puffier, and then you just were like, okay.
In fact, he apparently asked Johnson to get bigger for this role. This claim comes from Dwayne himself, who has confirmed on more than one occasion that he saw the transformation as another challenge.
I'm in my 5th level of life. I just like when Benny Safdie says, hey, I need you to, okay, I'll try it.
He even claimed he put on 30 pounds for the role.
Amazing. 22 prosthetics. I had to put on 30 pounds of just over 30 pounds of muscle. And so I put on just over 30 pounds.
And if you actually look at some of what we can see from the movie, I can buy it. I don't know if this is the peak shape he's ever been in, but he looks as big as he's ever been, if not slightly bigger. This should kind of clue you into something if you know anything about Mark Kerr or Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne is playing Mark from 20 years ago, when in reality they're only about 3 years apart in age. In the 90s and 2000s, Mark looked like this, an absolute freak of genetics and pharmaceutical science. This should raise eyebrows given that Dwayne is in his 50s. How is anybody supposed to seriously believe that Johnson was able to look even remotely similar to the crisis of beef that was prime Mark Kerr, a man who used to win fights by holding down other steroid gorillas and jamming his chin into their eye sockets? And Dwayne supposedly managed to look like that natty in his 50s. The idea is completely unbelievable. You can't even use the argument that Dwayne has freak genetics or superior work ethic either. On the genetic side of things, Kerr was built like he was drinking D-Bowl instead of breast milk as a baby. He looked like a comic book character whose origin story was that he fell into a vat of biceps and they grafted onto him like the Venom symbiote. Mark was also an elite athlete. Let's just look at the opening paragraph of his Wikipedia page. Quote, Mark Kerr is an American former wrestler and mixed martial artist. During his MMA career, he was a 2-time UFC heavyweight tournament champion, World Vale Tudo Championship tournament winner, and a Pride FC competitor. In collegiate wrestling, Kerr was an NCAA Division I champion. In freestyle wrestling, he won gold and silver medals at the World Cup and silver at the Pan American Games. In submission wrestling, Kerr is a 4-time ADCC world champion, winning his weight class twice along with the Absolute Division and the Superfight Championship. End quote. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but Mark Kerr was such a good wrestler that the only reason he didn't make it to the 1996 Olympic team was because the men he lost to in the trials were Kurt Angle and Mark Coleman. Angle would then go on to win the gold medal with a broken freaking neck, and Coleman is himself a UFC legend. That is the caliber of athlete we're talking about. I do not care how hard people think Dwayne Johnson works. He would never outwork a guy like Kerr, even in his 30s, let alone his 50s. And this isn't even getting into the fact that when Dwayne was in his 30s, he didn't look as good as Mark Kerr. Now, you might be thinking, what's the point of this? We all know Dwayne isn't natural, even if he won't acknowledge it. Why keep bringing it up? Well, I do think the size he put on for the role of Mark Kerr relates to his recent weight loss, and they both relate to a question I asked towards the end of my first video about The Rock. If nothing else, it makes you wonder how long he can keep this up. I mean, let's look 10 years into the future. Is he going to be doing this in his 60s? Is he going to be doing it in his 70s? How much will he weigh by then? 400 pounds? How many calories will he be eating? 9,000 or 10,000? Will he claim he's working out 8 days a week like Hulk Hogan, saying he wrestled 400 days in a year? And at what point does the general population's appetite for this dwindle? When do they go, okay, Dwayne, enough is enough? The question of how long Dwayne could sustain his sheer mass was one that felt like it had been looming over him for years. Unlike, say, Dave Bautista, who was enormous but was also showing range as an actor, Johnson's career had just become a series of carbon-copied roles that relied almost entirely on him being muscular. With movies like Black Adam and Red One underperforming compared to expectations, we were starting to figure out how long it would take for people to tire of Dwayne's shtick of being boringly muscular. And it turns out that the answer to that question was about 7 months. That's how long it took from when I put out my video to when filming for the Smashing Machine ended, and presumably when Johnson started to shrink. Personally, I think people were overreacting a bit about how much weight he lost. He did himself no favors with the choice of shirt that made him look like he was going full Dallas Buyers Club.
Nobody's got AIDS. I don't want to hear that word here again.
That being said, he's still clearly quite a large man. What really stuck out to me, though, was the change in his face and neck. He looked so different to me in that regard that I do kind of understand why some people's first impression was Ozempic or something. Just compare this picture to some of the shots from the Smashing Machine, where he looks like a beefsteak tomato made of dick veins. A year or two ago, he looked like a Ninja Turtle, and now he looks like the turtle guy from Master of Disguise.
Am I not turtly enough for the Turtle Club?
This dramatic weight loss has, of course, sparked some speculation as to how and why it happened. But I do want to make one quick point before getting into that. It's been over a year since filming for the Smashing Machine finished, so Dwayne has had a reasonably long time to drop the weight. Considering how extreme his physique was, it really wouldn't be all that surprising for him to drop 50 pounds in a year, especially if he cut back on lifting and all hardcore performance enhancers. The human body isn't meant to be 300 pounds lean. You basically have to be the size of Shaq to achieve that without substantial effort and chemical enhancement. And even in Shaq's case, it would be foolish to assume he wasn't on something. This does all raise the question of why he dropped the weight. On some level, the answer to that should be pretty obvious. It was probably for his health. The long-term side effects of PEDs are pretty bad for you, even if you're doing really high-quality stuff and keeping the protocol fairly simple. Even if there were no external factors, the guy has been pushing his body to the limit for almost 15 years solid, and he's now in the 5th level of his life, as he puts it.
And you reach your 5th level of life.
I'm in my 5th level of life.
I imagine someone close to him said that if you wanted to see level 6, he needed to take a break. And this also applies if you really, truly believe that he is totally natty. He was putting his body under a lot of stress regardless. That said, some other details have emerged. Sort of. One of the stories which has come out, I have a sneaking suspicion was intended to preempt the speculation, was that Johnson had been dealing with a gut issue of some kind. The issue was apparently significant enough that Johnson mentioned it to Ari Emanuel, the CEO of TKO Group Holdings, which owns the UFC and the WWE. Ari recommended that Dwayne speak to Dr. Mark Hyman of Foundational Medicine, and according to an episode of Hyman's podcast, he was able to heal Johnson's gut issues.
And so basically by doing kind of a program where we basically rehabbed your gut.
Yeah.
Essentially.
It was this amazing gut health shake.
Yeah.
That had about, I think, 10 ingredients, maybe more, that we put together for me, and some other things as well. But
Now, I'm going to spare you from having to listen to too much of that podcast. One, because it's not very interesting and they never address the elephant in the room of PEDs. Two, it may have just been something of a low-key promotion for foundational medicine.
So the full body scans, that are usually an hour, right? So this new technology that you guys acquired now brings it down from an hour to 22 minutes.
22 minutes.
This is hard to say exactly, but Johnson is also the guy who claimed to be eating In-N-Out for the first time on 3 different occasions.
And the reason why this is history in the making is because this is the very first time that I have ever tried an In-N-Out burger.
And 3, I only want to say hymen as many times as is necessary. I don't care if they're spelled differently, they still sound the same. It's entirely possible that Dwayne Johnson had some kind of gut issue. Frankly, there is no reason not to believe him other than the fact that people have been calling him Dwayne the Ad Johnson for years due to his never-ending product placement.
Wait a second. So if I'm understanding this,
you have a 2-3.
No amount of tequila.
Well, I don't know about that. There is an amount of tequila that can override your genes, that's for sure.
Moreover, I don't think Dwayne has ever claimed that his gut issues were the reason for his weight loss, and it wouldn't make sense anyway. Improving your gut health wouldn't make you lose 50 pounds of muscle. That's just idiotic. However, there was another issue mentioned on Dr. Hyman's podcast that led some people to speculate. During the conversation, Dwayne mentions that fairly recently, he had gone through a full cardio workup.
Hey, here's the cardiovascular workup, and let's look at the heart, and let's look at all the valves and things like that.
During the scan, they told him that they saw what appeared to be plaque in his circumflex artery. He was then given a more traditional MRI, which seemed to confirm the previous findings.
There was some buildup, or so they thought. And then when we looked at that on the old school traditional MRI and the scans, it looked like I had buildup, and then immediately...
From here, Dwayne says that they immediately wanted to put him on medication to treat what appeared to be the plaque in his artery. Dwayne claims he's not really into taking medicine, which I'll just give you a moment to appreciate.
And I was never a medication guy. Like, I wasn't taking any kind of medications or anything like that, and even now.
Okay. Since he's not really into medication, Dwayne decided to get a second opinion by contacting Dr. You know what? I'm just going to call him Dr. H from now on. Dr. H recommended that Dwayne get an AI scan.
For example, let's get a scan done, but let's get an AI scan done.
Which they say showed he did not have plaque buildup, but rather some kind of anatomical anomaly.
Looks great. It is just an anatomical thing that's happening back there. It's not buildup at all.
Yeah.
His valves look great.
What kind? They don't really get into it. Now, it's possible that whatever was found on those scans was really some kind of anatomical difference, but let me ask you a question. If you encountered an issue like this, and the scans were essentially 50-50 on whether it was life-threatening or not, and money was no issue to you, wouldn't you get a third opinion? Hell, how about a fourth or even fifth, rather than just stopping when you got the answer you wanted to get? Because that is kind of what it seems like Dwayne did here. He seemed really ecstatic about the results of the AI scan.
It was almost like, when you hear a song for the first time, and you're like, holy fuck, I love that song. That song sounds great.
Yeah.
So
it feels like a show of genuine emotion that you rarely get from him. Whether or not his heart scare was the reason behind his weight loss, people still jumped on it. In one of the rare examples of Johnson directly addressing a situation like this, he responded to a video by Alex Diago saying that he was cycling off gear for his health.
However, the show looks like it's finally coming to an end. He recently found out that he had plaque buildup in his circumflex artery from his decades of gear use, probably why he decided to hop off.
And so The Rock, after listening to this, says this is 100% not true.
But that comment appears to have since been deleted, probably because it wasn't clear what part of the video he was saying was 100% not true. To be entirely fair to Dwayne, this specific incident didn't have to be the thing that made him decide to drop the weight. A health scare of any kind can be something of a wake-up call about making life changes. Combine it with the gut issues, and they might have made Dwayne actually think about prioritizing his health and longevity.
my priority is longevity.
With that in mind, Johnson has actually come out in the wake of the speculation and stated his reason for losing the weight. Apparently, it's to play the role of the Chicken Man in an upcoming movie directed by Benny Safdie.
You seem smaller now.
Yeah. Svelte.
Svelte, okay, svelte. We'll say svelte. Why is that?
Because I'm preparing for a role. Teaming up with Benny Safdie again, and we're going to make a film called Lizard Music. The role that I will play is a 70-something-year-old man called the Chicken Man. Which, by the way, that's why I've been slimming down to play the Chicken Man.
Now, maybe this is true. Maybe it is. Whether or not Dwayne is actually losing weight to play a 70-year-old man whose best friend is a 70-year-old chicken.
And his best friend is a 70-something-year-old chicken.
It does kind of go back to that question I raised earlier, but just in a broader sense. How sustainable is it to remain some kind of gigantic muscle golem in Hollywood? And how long will they keep tiptoeing around the steroid issue? Because Johnson isn't the only one who has slimmed down from previously looking like they were drawn by a furry fetish artist. Not too long ago, Gucci fanatic Dave Bautista went through a weight loss transformation that garnered a similar reaction to Johnson's. He went from 300 pounds of human growth hormone and high blood pressure medication to a more svelte 240 pounds. Dave's reasoning for dropping the weight was far more straightforward and open than Dwayne's, saying that he just felt uncomfortable carrying around that much weight.
Now I'm about 240 pounds.
Wow, well done.
And I went just a year and a half ago for a knock at the cabin. I went up to 315 pounds.
What do you want to get?
And that's when the nightmare started. Like getting that weight off has been a challenge. Yeah. But at the time, I was just thinking, I gotta get big, I gotta get big. And I put on an uncomfortable amount of weight, and it took me forever to shed it off.
Lemon, Tim, how do you feel?
I feel great.
You look
I
great.
feel great. It took a couple of years to shed off some weight that I gained for a film, and I just don't get in shape like I used to when I was younger. It was like that.
Dave also danced around the steroid issue a bit, as all of Hollywood's Bane lookalikes do if they don't get caught first.
I had a very short period of time to put this weight on. I packed it on with french fries and pancakes. That's how I did it.
But with both Bautista and Johnson dropping down to less hypertensive proportions, it does make me wonder if we're on the verge of some kind of shift in the way Hollywood tries to force actors to leave humanity behind. We'll probably still see some big hoss actors. There will always be a job for a guy like Nathan Jones or Martin Ford, and actors will always go through body transformations, but I think an era might be ending. Both Dave Bautista and Dwayne Johnson have expressed a desire to break from the role of big man and take on more challenging projects.
For years, I've been dreaming and hoping, and my desire was to play not only a dramatic role, but something that I felt like I could really sink my teeth into, that we can get raw with.
There is a reason so many of Dwayne Johnson's movies during the unable to wear turtlenecks era were so generic. It's just kind of hard to give a deep character to a guy who is 6'3" and 300 pounds, because it starts to act like a distraction. It only works in the kind of movies where there is also a giant albino gorilla, or Vin Diesel can summon earthquakes. I know he made a lot of money, but even for a guy like Dwayne, who seems to be the living embodiment of the term tabula rasa, it probably had to be creatively unfulfilling. And when you already have $1 billion, why put your health at risk for slop movies that cause everyone to think you suck at acting when you can just prove them wrong? There is a catch to this whole story, though, in my opinion. Despite Dwayne acknowledging that this is essentially a whole new book in his life, he has been fairly vague about the situation. I said in my first video about The Rock that 10 years or so ago, he could have come out and said he was starting TRT or something similar, and it probably would have worked with a lot of people. There was probably a window for him, sometime 8 to 10 years ago, where he could have come out and said that he was starting some form of HRT as he was getting older. And I honestly doubt anyone would have really cared. But then he waited so long and went so far with his transformations that he painted himself into a corner, one from which he could never really talk himself out of again. He has another opportunity now to show transparency, if not come clean. If he really wants to start a whole new book in his life and career,
I would say chapter, I would say new book.
A whole new book.
A whole new book.
He could take that opportunity to talk about the realities of being an actor who has to maintain an unrealistic physique without giving us the typical diatribe about eating bison and rice and working out for 3 hours every day. Would it hurt his stock a bit? Maybe, but it might also cause a lot of people to gain some respect for him. More so than if he just continues to pretend that he was 300 pounds ripped well into his 50s and he did it all naturally. If he actually took a principled stance on something, it would go a long way to rehab the image that he's just a people pleaser. We've seen him do things like apologize for donating $5 million to the fund for the Maui fires, or backtracking on commenting on a Joe Rogan Instagram post. Actions that have made people believe that he has no true personality or values and just wants to appeal to everyone. The problem is, when you try to be everything to everyone, you just end up becoming nobody's nothing. This is a chance for the real Dwayne Johnson, if there is one, to step away from the cardboard cutout that has been presented for so many years. He can finally take off the mask and do something genuinely good with his massive influence.
I would say chapter. It's a new book.
A whole new book.
A whole new book. And I can't wait. And I love it.
But I won't hold my breath. Addendum. I had much of the work for this video done for quite some time, but for a variety of reasons, I stalled out on completing the editing. During that time period, though, The Smashing Machine has seen its theatrical release. The film has been a commercial bomb, having the worst opening for a Dwayne Johnson film ever. This trend has only continued into the movie's second week, where it dropped off by a further 70%. The result isn't exactly surprising to me, as the idea of Dwayne Johnson playing Mark Kerr seemed like an idea destined for box office failure from the beginning. Few people who currently watch MMA know who Mark Kerr is, and even fewer care. This is even more true of the general public. Furthermore, Kerr's story was already told well in a critically acclaimed documentary made over 20 years ago. Also, Dwayne Johnson was a weird choice for the role. People expect to see him in big-budget slop movies.
It's ELF!
Not dramatic passion projects about relatively unknown sports figures. Despite the positive critical reviews of The Smashing Machine, there is basically no target audience for a movie like this. Still, it may have served its purpose, offering Johnson some kind of bridge into more diverse roles. His performance is receiving praise. So, while the movie may end up being a financial disappointment, it may also give Johnson some confidence to keep taking roles in smaller, more personal films.
And I said, I am your chicken man.
Or it may not. That's the thing about Dwayne. He has a history of flip-flopping and changing with the headwinds of popular opinion. Maybe this diversion into small-scale dramatic projects ends as quickly as it began. By next year, maybe Dwayne will have packed the muscle back on and will be starring in a bunch of boring blockbusters of no consequence. Only time will tell. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video or listening to the audio version, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And a special thank you to my supporters on Patreon who help make these videos possible. Thank you. Squirt, Rusty Shackelford, Jackson, Fightback CBD, Mike Roballs, Izzy's Beans, Mad Max Burger, Gaius Anisha Patton, Scott Richmond, Mad Nexus, Joke, Random Candor, Fuzzy Yanus, Old Neon, Timothy Lee Peterson, Wet Cigarette, Firebrand, Quasi, Snepsts, Alex, and Neem.